78 foot by 12, my milk bottle museum. My milk bottle museum, loosely called a shed, I like to think of it as a workshop which contains my collection of 17,500 British milk bottles and probably 2,000 or 3,000 from overseas, from all different countries, Australia and Russia and Argentina, you name it, they had a milk bottle there. Even Trappist monks from Hong Kong had their own milk in bottles. It holds approximately 17,500 milk bottles, which my children worked out was about 14.25 tonne of glass. As far as I'm aware, I have the largest collection of British milk bottles in the British Isles. We go to places where you wouldn't imagine people would go. We pick odd areas. Stumbled across an old milk bottle from the 1950s in the Bracken. Took it home, it was from Whitchurch in Shropshire, and I discovered the dairy was closing down. I then did a bit more investigation and found that all the dairies were starting to close down or being taken over. So I decided to try and get as many bottles as I could, and now 30 years later I'm where I'm at. I've got milk bottles from a dairy which may have started 1910, 1920, and I've got bottles right through to say the 1960s, 70s when they closed. One man, which is Cyril Bates in Southport, I pulled into his yard and he went out and he came back with 3 crates full of bottles, plus 3 spare bottles, which is a total of 63 bottles. Every time he'd had a bottle or a batch of bottles made, he'd saved 1 bottle of the design, 1/3 of a pint, 1/2 a pint, 1/4 pint, whatever, because he knew someday somebody might want an example. And it was me. Just picked 1 bottle out because it's in your face. It's Associated Dairies. They were a dairy in Leeds in the 1950s and before. And most people won't realise that they're now ASDA, Associated Dairies, ASDA. I may have turned these down in the past because normally you get a rollover top. This has a milk bottle top, and some of these have been embossed, and I may have walked past them and not even realised they were once milk bottles. This one has got a Union Jack on. I'm a royalist anyway, so I have bottles from the Royal Dairy Farm of Windsor, quarts, pints, half pints, right back to the 1950s. But anything with the Union Jack on I collect. And this is just a very nice example where you have the blue and the red, and obviously the milk when it's inside provides the white background. When they were filming Great Balls of Fire, they wanted a couple of period milk bottles, so they got in touch with me and I said, yeah, I've got a couple of bottles, and I put them in the post, and my bottles are in the film. When Jerry Lewis came over to the UK in the 1958, he was on the wagon, so they put my 2 milk bottles with milk in a champagne bucket in his London hotel room, filled with milk, and they zoomed symbolically on them, you know, to say he was drinking milk and not the alcohol. Technically, 17,500 milk bottles are not worth anything. They're just glass, the most common thing on the planet. But to me, they're worth millions because they're my pride and joy. If I had a choice between 500 cartons and a dirty, rotten milk bottle, I'd have the dirty, rotten milk bottle.